The Summer's Home, Living Room, Sunnydale, 2001. Xander, Tara, Anya, and Spike stared in disbelief at the unconscious body sprawled across the couch in the Summers residence living room. Buffy stepped back from the couch, gently guiding the younger version of Dawn with her before pulling her close and wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Nearby, Giles crouched down, removed his glasses, and studied the scars lining the older Dawn's face with quiet intensity. If you're enjoying this story so far, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps keep stories like this alive, and it means more than you know. She's our little bit alright, Spike drawled as he lingered near the foyer at the edge of the room. He inhaled slowly, slipping his hands into his pockets while eyeing the older Dawn. Her scent was familiar, mostly the same as the younger version, but there were subtle differences. He caught the smell of dried blood that wasn't hers. His gaze flicked to her shirt, where faint specks suggested it belonged to Doc. And beneath it all, there was another scent clinging to her. Spike glanced towards Willow, who stood beside Tara, Tara's hand gripping her arm for support. He drew in Willow's scent for comparison before looking back at the older Dawn, his brow furrowing. Why did the girl smell so strongly of Willow? He shook his head, forcing the question aside, and muttered, "But wherever she came from, I smell blood. Gunpowder too. Could be from the gun she fired, and the blood's probably Doc's." "You think?" Xander shot back dryly. Spike leveled him with a flat look, offering no reaction before returning his attention to the unconscious Dawn. "Dawnie," Tara murmured softly, standing close to Willow as she steadied her. "Are you sure it was the key leaving her body?" "Yeah," the younger Dawn replied, her voice uncertain. "I could feel it calling to me. It was like there couldn't be two of it in the same place. That's what it felt like. But if her body was created to house the key," Willow reasoned, her voice careful, "then..." She turned to the younger Dawn, who pressed her lips together anxiously. Willow shifted her gaze back to the older Dawn and continued, "Then how is she still here?" "The monk told me Dawn's human," Buffy recalled, her voice tight as she remembered the monk's final words spoken as he died in her arms. "So even without the key, she would still be human, right? I mean, the time to use Dawn's blood came and went, and since the key didn't leave Dawn's body..." Buffy gestured first to the younger version of her sister, then to the older one. "Does that mean she's still the key?" "We can't even begin to guess what happened," Giles replied gravely. "The spell the monks used was extraordinarily complex, or so I suspect. But for now, I'll continue my research. Since this older Dawn is alive and stable, we can reasonably deduce that she is still human." "I don't want the Watchers Council knowing about her," Buffy stated firmly, nodding toward the older Dawn. "They won't," Giles assured her as he rose to his feet, his gaze lingering on the girl on the couch. "I suggest one of us stays here in the living room. If she wakes in the middle of the night, it would be best if she were greeted by a familiar face." "I'll take the first watch," Giles added, then turned his attention to the younger Dawn. He drew in a slow breath before gently explaining that she needed rest, that it had been a very long day for everyone. Buffy nodded, placing her hands on young Dawn's shoulders and telling her she could share the bed in her room. Dawn sighed, then nodded reluctantly as Buffy suggested she take a shower. "I'll make some..." "Buffy?" came a soft, strained voice. The whispers stopped instantly. Everyone turned as the older Dawn stirred, squinting as she focused on the faces around her. "Buffy?" "I'm still here, Dawnie," Buffy murmured as she stepped forward, holding onto her sister's younger self. She reached out with her other hand and clasped the older Dawn's hand. "We're here." I thought it was a dream," the older Dawn whispered as she stared at her sister. You're alive." "I'm alive," Buffy replied softly as she crouched down, the younger Dawn dropping to one knee beside her. Giles? Alive?" the older Dawn asked. Giles narrowed his eyes briefly before moving into her line of sight. "I'm here, Dawn," Giles assured her gently as he met her gaze. "You're exhausted. You need to sleep. And And we'll talk when you get some rest. Have to know. Wasn't the dream, Dawn murmured, her eyes fluttering closed before opening halfway again. Her expression made it clear how exhausted she was, how desperately she wanted sleep. Xander alive? Hey, Xander answered quickly. Anya narrowed her eyes at him, but the older Dawn's gaze shifted to her, and a genuine smile spread across her face. Anya? Dawn asked faintly. Still kicking, Anya replied. So, in your future, I'm dead, and so is Giles. Are we all dead? Because if we are, then... All dead, Dawn whispered. All gone. And now alive. The end's not coming, and... Dawn? Buffy asked softly as the older woman's eyes finally closed. She's asleep, Giles confirmed after checking her pulse and listening as a gentle snore escaped her. She's only asleep. Great, Anya muttered, frowning. So all of us are dead. I wonder if I'm still there, in the future, Spike mused as he stared off into the distance. A future of death and destruction. Not bad. And he cut himself off when he noticed everyone staring at him. Shrugging, he added defensively, It was just a question. Be that as it may, Giles said, turning his attention back to the sleeping older Dawn. As I mentioned before, I'll stay up and watch over her. I still have some research to complete, and the rest of you need to get some rest. We won a significant victory today, and we've earned it. Then tomorrow we deal with how we die. Buffy deadpanned. Get some rest, Buffy. Dawn, all of you. Giles urged gently. Get some rest. Los Angeles, 2015. So where are they, little Dawnie? The man in the leather overcoat drawled. He wore the coat over a yellow vest and black tactical trousers. His posture relaxed despite the brutality of the setting. Dawn was on her knees on the stone-covered ground. Her arms were chained above her head to the ceiling, the metal restraints biting into her wrists. The chain ran along a pulley before descending and anchoring into the far wall, forcing her to kneel upright. She tilted her head back, staring at the ceiling with her teeth clenched as distant screams echoed through the chamber. Screams of pain from the 25 Slayers who had been captured alongside her. They had been taken during a daring mission meant to push back the end by finally destroying the Seed of Wonder. The Seed was the very reason magic existed in the Earth dimension. If it had been destroyed, as it should have been in 2011, had Twilight not intervened, magic would have been cut off from Earth entirely, and Twilight would have been driven away. But that moment had been stolen. Twilight had distracted Buffy at the last possible second, slamming Giles' dead body into her just as she was about to strike the shining red object. Dawn had been there, standing in the underground chamber when Giles' corpse crashed into Buffy. The Slayer was knocked to the ground, the scythe slipping from her grasp and clattering uselessly across the stone floor. Dawn had rushed to Buffy immediately. Her sister lay injured, Giles' lifeless body draped over her, while Twilight made his move. He sprinted for the Seed and seized it, then fled the underground crypt, leaving Buffy and the others behind to face the reality of Giles' death. And with that act, the world as they knew it ended. So, quick pause. If this alternate future hit you the same way it hits me, let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying the story, sharing it really helps more Buffy fans find it. Ever since then, the Slayers, demons of the Earth dimension, and the military had fought side by side against Twilight's demonic hordes, but Earth's defenses were ground to dust with horrifying speed. Hundreds of Slayers were killed within the first year of the Resistance campaign against the Incursion. Kennedy, Rona, Violet, and many others fell in battle. Even attempts to destroy the Seed proved useless. Twilight had completely taken over the dimension. All the survivors could do was continue fighting. All they could do was resist until their final breath. Back in the present, it had been only a few days earlier when Dawn and several other Slayers were captured during an attack on one of their bases. The wards protecting the base, powerful enough, or so they believed, to keep Twilight's army at bay, had failed. Willow herself had cast them, which meant they should have been unbreakable. When the attack came, Dawn realized the truth too late. There was a traitor among them. There was nothing she or anyone else could do. Humans and demons alike were slaughtered as the hordes overran the base. Hundreds of men, women, and children under the Resistance Cell's protection were murdered. Hundreds of demons who had sided with the Resistance were killed, along with military personnel stationed there. In the aftermath, over 50 captives were taken alive. Dawn was among them. 25 of the prisoners were slayers. Since her capture, Dawn had feared the worst, that Twilight might have found Buffy or killed her. But hearing the otherworldly being wearing Angel's body demand Buffy's location brought a twisted sense of relief. If Twilight was still asking, then Buffy was still free. The man, no, the thing, paced around her now, his boots echoing against the stone. "Where is she, Dawnie?" Twilight murmured as he circled her slowly, his gaze never leaving her face. "Angel," she pleaded as a door opened to her left. A glowing red demon with a single eye stepped inside on hooved feet, a whip clenched in one of its 3 clawed hands. Dawn stared at the demon as it grinned at her, revealing a mouth full of bloodied, jagged teeth before it turned its attention to Twilight. She tore her gaze away from the creature and looked back at Angel. "Angel, I know you're in there somewhere. You need to fight." "And Angel is long gone," Twilight sneered as he looked down at the young woman. He crossed the room and approached the demon, who handed him the whip. Dawn watched as Twilight unfurled the weapon, noticing the slick, glistening layer of blood coating its length and dripping onto the floor. She caught the subtle nod exchanged between the two before the demon moved past her and toward the rear of the chamber. Dawn followed it with her eyes, twisting her head over her shoulder as she watched the creature seize a length of chain attached to the far wall. Her gaze tracked the chain upward to the pulley mounted in the ceiling, just as her arms snapped taut. She hissed in pain as her shoulders burned, her body lifting off the floor. The demon hauled on the chain, dragging her upward. Her feet brushed the ground for only a few seconds before leaving it completely as her body continued to rise. Dawn listened helplessly to the screams of the other slayers echoing from nearby rooms. Then, abruptly, the screams were cut off. Dawn hung suspended in the air, her body twisting and spinning slowly. The demon locked the chain in place before turning away. It exited the room only after Twilight ordered it to remove the bodies of the dead slayers and use them as food for his pets, ravenous vampires he had turned to his cause. "Dawnie, Dawnie, Dawnie," Angel murmured as he studied the whip, his voice eerily calm. Dawn continued to hang helplessly in midair. "Where's Buffy? Where's Willow? All your other useless meatbags?" "Angel," Dawn cried as her body spun slowly around. "Fight Twilight, please." "I told you Angel is gone," Twilight roared as he seized Dawn mentally, halting her rotation. Dawn stared at him as his eyes flared green and his fangs slid into view. Her heart pounded as an unseen force twisted her body again, turning her back to him. Then she heard a crack. She gasped, breathing hard, and glanced over her shoulder as the whip snapped against the ground. Slowly, she lifted her eyes to the enraged face staring back at her. He was shouting now, demanding the location of the remaining resistance. "Carla wanted to be with her parents," Twilight snarled. "She came to me during a mission. I promised her I would reunite her with them if she gave me the location of her cell. She gave you up, gave your base up, and now she's with her parents." "You mean she's dead?" Dawn hissed. "So is your resistance cell," Twilight sneered as the whip cracked sharply against the floor. "Now, how about I give you a different deal? You give up Buffy, and you live. You'll be my scribe. You'll write about the end of human history. You'll bear witness to the end of humanity itself and the rise of my demons on this new earth. You'll be the great historian of this new world. You'll be honored among the other demons. You won't be harmed, and you'll be free to go wherever you want. All I want is Buffy. All I want is my mother." Dawn still remembered the day Buffy had begun exhibiting powers that a Slayer ordinarily did not possess. It would be much later that she and the others discovered the truth. The increase in power was being granted by the universe itself, meant to counter a similar rise of power in Angel, power that was being given to him by Twilight. The Scooby's working theory had been that the universe had given Buffy these extraordinary abilities to kill Angel, to prevent Twilight from taking over their reality. Instead, what happened was far worse. The two lovers consummated their relationship once again, and in doing so, they brought about the apocalypse. They gave birth to Twilight, pulling the entity fully into the Earth dimension. Then Twilight seized complete control of Angel, who murdered Giles and fled with the Seed of Wonder. What no one understood was why Twilight had not simply killed them all in that moment. Spike had theorized that Twilight was not yet all-powerful, that he would only reach full strength once the entirety of the Earth dimension was under his control. Until then, Twilight needed to hide the seed, waiting until his transformation was complete. I should have tortured her that day. I should have taken her then. Twilight roared as he lashed the whip across Dawn's back. She released one blood-curdling scream after another as the whip struck her repeatedly. The leather tore through the green and black army BDU she wore, ripping fabric and skin alike. With each strike, blood poured from the wounds and spattered onto the once dry, icy floor. After several brutal lashes, Twilight let the whip fall and lunged forward. He seized Dawn by the shoulders as another scream tore from her throat, then violently spun her around to face him. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she sobbed uncontrollably. Twilight grabbed her by the jaw, fingers digging into her skin and demanded to know where Buffy was hiding. "I don't know," Dawn cried, her vision swimming as she teetered on the edge of unconsciousness. The truth was that each resistance cell operated independently without knowledge of the other's locations. Buffy had told only Dawn where she was hiding, believing that separation gave them the best chance of survival, that if one of them fell, the other would keep fighting. Every instinct screamed at Dawn to reveal the truth of Buffy's location, to save herself, but she forced that thought away. There was no world in which she would betray her sister. "I don't know," Dawn sobbed again. Twilight's jaw clenched as his rage peaked. He leaned in close, his face inches from her, and screamed into her face, "You will protect Buffy no matter what? Where is she?" Twilight roared. As he screamed, he drove the thumb of his free hand into Dawn's left eye socket. He pressed into the eyeball, crushing it, and then forced his thumb deeper. Dawn gasped for breath as her body convulsed, her legs flailing wildly against the restraints. A raw, soul-deep scream tore from the brunette's throat as blood streamed down her cheek. Twilight laughed, pushing his thumb even further inward. Finally, he tore it free from the ruined socket and licked the blood and viscous fluid clinging to his skin. With the fingernail of his other hand, he carved into Dawn's cheek. He leaned forward and dragged his tongue through the fresh blood as Dawn sobbed uncontrollably, hovering on the edge of unconsciousness from the pain. "Tell me where she is, Dawnie," Angel demanded coldly. Dawn stared at him through her one remaining eye, swollen and tear-stained, her vision blurred. Angel leaned closer, his voice sharpening with each word. "Where is she?" Dawn continued to sob, shaking her head weakly as her legs kicked in helpless spasms from the agony. Twilight repeated the question for several more seconds, his patience unraveling, before surrendering fully to his rage. He raked his sharp fingernails across the empty socket. Dawn screamed, a skin tore away, her cry breaking into a hoarse wail when he violently jammed his thumb back into the hollow cavity and twisted it inside. She screamed without pause while he continued to demand Buffy's location. Just as he barked the question again, Dawn's screams echoing through the chamber, a massive explosion rocked the castle. The stone walls shuddered violently. Twilight jerked back as Dawn collapsed into racking sobs, white-hot pain tearing through her skull. He turned toward the door, a slow smile spreading across his face at the sounds of weapons fire, grunts, shouts, screams, and heavy bodies hitting the ground. "Dawn!" Buffy's voice rang out over the chaos, cutting through Dawn's sobs. I'm coming. Summer's residence, 0600 hours, 2001. Dawn snapped her eye open and immediately realized she was lying on something soft, covered by a blanket. She slowly pulled the blanket aside while rubbing her forehead with her other hand. Still heavy with grogginess, the older Dawn pushed herself upright and looked around. She was lying on the couch in the living room of her old house. She spotted Giles asleep in an armchair that had been turned to face her. A book rested on his lap, with several others scattered across the floor around the chair. Dawn managed a small smile as she wiped her right eye with the back of her hand, then carefully stood up. She checked to make sure the patch still covered her left eye before turning back toward Giles. Lifting the blanket, she draped it gently over him, removed his glasses, and placed them neatly on the side table beside the chair. She stepped back, her eye closing as the memory of Twilight snapping Giles's neck hit her again. Dawn opened her eye again, forcing her breathing to steady, then moving toward the mantel. She studied the framed photographs there as memories flooded back, happier moments from her own timeline. After a moment, she glanced back at Giles, then toward the foyer, her gaze settling on the stairs. Drawing in a deep breath, Dawn approached the staircase and began to climb, moving carefully and quietly. When she reached the top, she headed toward Buffy's room. She eased the door open just enough to peek inside and saw Buffy asleep beside her younger self. As Dawn gently pulled the door closed again, another memory surfaced. Willow crashing through the doorway in the room where she was tortured, eyes wide with shock and horror at Dawn's condition. Through tears and the stabbing pain in her head, Dawn had watched as Willow's eyes and hair turned jet black just as Twilight lunged for her. Willow had muttered a spell that sent him hurtling through the walls of his dark castle, while Buffy rushed past the witch. "Dawn!" Buffy had screamed as Willow magically severed the chains. Riley and several soldiers had arrived moments later, warning of incoming demonic reinforcements and insisting they evacuate immediately. Back in the present day, the older Dawn released a slow sigh, closed Buffy's door fully, and turned down the hall toward what used to be her room. There, she saw Xander and Anya sleep on her bed. A soft smile crossed her face as she quietly shut the door again, grateful that they were both alive. She continued to the final door at the end of the hallway. Reaching for the doorknob, her hand trembled as she imagined the two people sleeping on the other side. At the last moment, Dawn pulled her hand away and stepped back. She couldn't bear to see Willow and Tara together. The wound left by losing her lover was still too raw. Turning away, Dawn retraced her steps and headed back toward the stairs. Gripping the banister, the former key began making a mental list of what needed to be done next to prevent her future from ever coming to pass. Find Warren and the trio and take care of them, she resolved as she descended. That will stop my future from happening. That will make everything better. But there were other things, smaller things, things that could still be stopped. Willow's addiction, Jasmine, and so many other turning points that cracked the walls of reality, allowing Twilight even an inch into this dimension. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, Dawn turned left into the dining room. She moved slowly, breathing in the faint scent of vanilla as she entered the kitchen. Her throat tightened as she imagined this house in her timeline. It was destroyed, buried beneath millions of tons of rubble beneath the Sunnydale crater. She opened the back door and stepped out into the cool, breezy early morning. Crossing the porch, she leaned against the railing and looked out over the backyard, her lips forming a small smile. Closing her eye, she took a quiet breath and whispered, "I'm home, Willow. I'll change things, and I'll protect you." Dawn imagined kissing the Willow she had once known, then opened her eye again and looked down at the green grass. Things were going to change. To be continued.